Thank you for listening to the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast with hosts Clara and Jimmy Hinton. If you're new to the podcast, please subscribe and share so you never miss an episode. Android users can find us and subscribe on your Play Music app. Apple users can find us and subscribe on Apple Podcasts. You can find us on Stitcher. You can follow us on Spreaker. And you can find the podcast on jimmyhinton.org and findingahealingplace.com. Please rate our show, subscribe, and share so that we can spread the word. Let's get into the show. All right, welcome to this week's podcast with host Jimmy Hinton.
And Jimmy's mom, Clara.
And another special guest, one of our patrons, Helen Maidenrath. Helen, welcome.
Hi.
All right. So this is in response, and you so graciously offered to talk about triggers after hearing our episode on triggers. Obviously it's a sensitive topic, and I just appreciate your willingness to be able to talk with us. And you and I connected on the phone earlier and talked about this, and it was just eye-opening for me, the short conversation that we had. So, anyway, we just want to thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me on here.
Absolutely. You and I connected earlier and talked about triggers and different things. And I have some notes here that I think are really helpful. But one of the things that we talked about was, triggers are often used as evidence against victims and survivors. And it's as if, people say, well, you're just being overreactive, or you're being too protective, or you're just responding to abuse and you're being paranoid. I think those are unfair assessments because, I really believe that oftentimes triggers are the body's way of responding in a normal way. And one of the points that you have brought up is that, in childbirth, your body responds to trauma. Your body's experiencing all kinds of trauma, and that's just a normal thing that your body does to tell you that, hey, something is happening here. Yeah. Speak to that a little bit.
Well, so actually, I think that there's similarities in a certain portion of childbirth, and I work in childbirth, so I'm familiar with this. But there's a point in labor where you go through transition, and I always explain to any of the ladies that I'm working with that your transition is truly a transition where your uterus starts working differently, and that transition can take some time, where it's no longer dilating. It's actually trying to transition into active pushing. And so that usually helps calm moms down. But during that transition, your body is already going through a positive feedback system, which most of our systems in our body are negative feedbacks, which sounds bad, but it's actually it's a good thing. It's basically where we've produced enough of something, and the negative feedback says, nope, we're good. You can stop now. And it keeps us regulated and balanced. And in childbirth, the positive feedback is with the oxytocin that continues to produce more and more until you complete the act of birth. And with a panic attack, you have almost the exact same type of symptoms, and it is one of the only other positive feedback systems that our bodies engage in. And it really goes to say something, like our body is not responding, our minds are not responding to a clear indication that we need to do something about something. And if we don't recognize it, and it can take years to develop. I didn't have my first panic attack till I was 33. And basically it's all hands on deck. And it's the similarities are eerie. Actually, it's, you'll be in transition and labor, you'll be nauseous, you could be vomiting, you're shaking. You have this pervasive feeling of, I think I just need to figure out how, but I really need to exit my body and run away. And that's got to be possible. So let me think about that. Well, in a panic attack, it feels exactly the same. I am in so much fear that my body is going to kill me at this point that I need to run away from it. There's got to be a way for me to get out of my body. And then, you know, like shaking and sweating and all those kind of things. They're all exactly the same in transition. I've seen it all. So I think that it's kind of a good lesson to look at that and see that there's absolutely nothing wrong with responding to a signal like that from your body and trying to work with it instead of do what you've always done, which is try and run away from that. Nobody's going to enter into that willingly. And I think one of you has had a few children, so you might know what I'm talking about.
I was just thinking of all kinds of questions to ask Mom, you know, because I don't think either of us have ever experienced a panic attack in our life. At least I know I haven't.
Have. Yeah, they're not fun.
But,
they are,
you know,
definitely not fun. One actually sent me to the hospital when I was, I think, 19 years old. I had no clue what was happening. And I started having all these symptoms. It was horrible. And, you know, and those who are listening, who have experienced a panic attack, understand what I'm talking about. You just don't know.
Yeah.
You think you're going to die. You can't convince yourself otherwise. Your body is going through all kinds of craziness and weird sensations, and it's real, you know, at that moment. So I understand that. And Jimmy, you're lucky that you haven't felt one.
Well, I know. I know.
And yet.
You know, like Helen was saying too, you experienced many childbirths.
I did.
So your body knows.
Yes.
And your mind knows exactly what Helen's talking about.
Right.
And I think, you know, it's an interesting way of describing this as, you know, this is a proper response to trauma.
I really appreciated, Helen, that you said that.
And you can't run from it.
No. Mm-mm. No. Mm-hmm. Nor should you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I look at panic attacks, and I think with survivors especially, the one thing that I hear personally is they're asking, what is wrong with me?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is nothing.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, your body is responding. You know, I think you explained this pretty brilliantly, that your body is responding in a positive way to past trauma. And, you know, you need to figure out how to really work with that instead of running from it, because you're right, you can't run from it.
Do you know, Helen and Jimmy, what is awesome as I'm listening to this explained this way? It's actually calming to hear that there's nothing wrong with you because you've experienced that type of reaction to trauma. You know, that is normal. Mm-hmm. That is a normal response.
Yeah. And it can be something that with when I'm talking to moms before birth and then during birth, especially because you're also working with somebody who's almost not of this world anymore. We call it labor land, and I hope you could speak to this as well. As far as I hope that you've had a few births where people were supportive, but we often run into people who are trying to manage labor, manage somebody else's labor with narcotics, which mostly just quiet you down, so you don't sound like you're in pain, and then people get in your face and be like, you're just, you know, pregnant laboring women are just obnoxious and annoying, and there's something to deal with in that moment, because they're just not. People are treated like kids. It's very disrespectful, and when I'm at a birth and a mom is panicking because it's getting scary, especially first time births. I always will just get down next to them. Don't stare at them in the face because, good God, that is so wrong. But just get down with them and just be like, I'm with you, and you can do this because you already are doing this. Mm-hmm. And this is normal. And I'm always working with the birth partner, which is usually the dad. And I'm always keeping an eye on him because he's also panicking. and you can catch it. You can catch it ahead of time. You can look and say, oh, actually that's normal. Like, that's okay. Like, this is what we're expecting. She's doing a great job. And the feedback between the two of them is so critical, for them to believe in each other. And so to build up that trust that, okay, like this, she's not panicking. She knows that this is normal. She's also not getting on our case for panicking. And she's catching all of those like nuanced, feelings of, I think, now we're in super big danger, and why did we make this decision for labor? Like, I think we should change our mind, kind of thing. And it really helps just let them do the work. And it's a beautiful work. So.
This is interesting to me because one of the things that was very unhelpful for my wife, for all three of her births, was all these people, and really it was the women who were problematic, people who had been pregnant before, and they had all this advice for her, things that she needed to be doing, and, things in her diet that she should be eating. And, then she had the ladies that are like, oh, you're just going to sneeze and that baby will just come right out, and then she had other ones that are like, it's going to rip you from top to bottom. And like, they were really graphic. And, finally my wife was like, I wish people would just leave me alone and let me experience this. Right. I thought she was absolutely right. Like, if we had people who are experiencing triggers who did what you do in the labor room, where you normalize it and say, this is okay. You're going to make it through. And this is just how your body's responding right now. And let's talk through this. And I'm not going to get in your face. I'm not going to treat you like a kid. We're going to walk through this together. Man, that would be so calming and reassuring.
Yeah, absolutely.
That would be a gift, actually.
Yeah, it is. Yes.
Yeah. And you can't preempt, like, there's no pregame to this. You can do as much as you can to prepare for it, but you can't, it's a violation of somebody's like privacy to question whether they might experience something like this. Like me, I didn't have one until I was 33, so I never thought that was possible. And so that would have been unhelpful to me. And really there's an experiential quality to it that you can't prepare for. Mm-hmm. So if you go through any type of trauma-informed care model where you're looking at addressing the person in a way that's just going to help them mitigate trauma later on. And so there's 5 principles, and I think I wrote them down and sent them in some notes for you, but I don't have them right in front of me. But the first 2 are, the person wants to feel safe. They want to feel safe. They want to feel heard. They want to feel like they have some agency. But they're not reachable by rationality. You cannot rationalize with somebody who is thinking that they're literally dying. And so if you don't do active measures to, overtly give them power back, empower them, mutuality is another one of those 5 principles. And it basically speaks to, you're not in charge, but you're trying to work with them with them having the power to tell you what they need. And it takes practice, I think, to be around something like that, and to not let it seep into you, and like you're starting to panic, like, gosh, this person really believes truly that this is happening. Like, what if it is happening? So you have to be able to maintain a sense of distance that allows you to still try and facilitate some of these things that will help them later not become re-traumatized by that event. And those kind of events can be very empowering and very healing if handled in the right way by the people around them. So
I think that's really important too, because, the first thing that we want to do, and you talked about it in childbirth too, we want to just medicate them and take the pain away.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't really help anybody identify, in the case of panic attacks and triggers and things like that, it doesn't help them identify what caused it in the first place. Sure, it might calm your body down, at least temporarily. Mm-hmm. But those panic attacks, what I've seen, just from people I'm close to who have routine panic attacks, they keep coming back. Medication doesn't stop them from coming back. It just, kind of calms the body down temporarily. And, I think I want to kind of focus in on one of the points that you had made as we were typing notes back and forth to each other. But I'm going to read this directly. You said, we can learn from our triggers. The new ones that crop up after intense therapy make us question our self-worth again. If we've even managed to gather some self-worth at all. That's another topic entirely, because self-worth is hard to come by as an adult. So I want to ask the question, what are some examples of new triggers that might pop up whenever you're going through therapy, and how have you handled those? How have you learned to listen to what your body is telling you?
Yeah. Well, I'd say the biggest ones for me are more of a bureaucratic nature. If I am dealing with a organization, kind of a humanless rule system that I'm unfamiliar with, all of a sudden, I've discovered that can be very triggering for me, just because, I was raised as everyone else was raised, where we believe that our justice system might have some form of justice in it, and some fairness, and something, to hang on to kind of ride out a storm. And my experience has been to completely obliterate that mindset. And for a while there, I really felt like I didn't know anything about anything. And I felt like everything I thought was truth was lies, and everything was turned upside down for me. And so during that time, I certainly was not a panicking person that you could reason with.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was it was, what do they say? The hardest things to treat if you talk to a therapist, the hardest things to treat are abusers, first of all, because they don't want to change.
Yeah.
And then the paranoid person who's actually being persecuted. And so when you're walking into a humanless set of rules like the court system, and you don't have access to legal help because you are completely unfamiliar with the system, and people may not know this, but the civil court system does not pay for your lawyers. You don't get pro bono lawyers. You don't get public defenders. And it's a huge gap that allows very recognized abuse, which is the economic abuse that happens in the aftermath of a divorce. And I kind of look at it like, wow, this is so much proof that he's an abusive person, but people still don't see that. And so for me, realizing how people react to things and how much they don't want to believe that these frameworks are fair, and having to deal with these bureaucratic systems on my own and really failing miserably at it, like just getting chewed up and spit out with the results. No matter how much I learn, because I do. I pick them apart, and I'm, I call it my cheap online law degree, because that's the kind of person I am. I research everything, and I did the best I could, and I still just failed, because the truth is the system is not fair, and they just disregard me as somebody who is self-represented, and they just copy and paste his male lawyer's name on the any type of document, and that's the only information that goes in. It was like I was invisible. It was like I was an absent parent. Because I do have friends who had ex-husbands that just disappeared, and I couldn't tell you how similar the experience they had in the court of just getting whatever they wanted, and what my ex managed to do with me not having any representation. So,
wow,
those are really scary for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's a word that you said that it just jumped out at me, but you said you felt invisible. And I think Anna Salter was one of the people who really focused in on this concept of survivors just getting so used to being emotionally invisible. It's like nobody sees them, and they get so conditioned to that. And so, as I hear you talk, this almost sounds like an extension of what you already were living as a survivor, where you're just so used to being emotionally invisible. Then you walk into the court, and that invisibility just continues. And it makes sense to me how those bureaucratic systems can be very triggering. And that's probably, my guess is that's probably really common, which awakens me a little bit to the idea of how important it is for those of us who are not survivors or even survivor advocates, to show up to court with survivors, because that's a terrifying experience to have to show up to court, and you're already vulnerable. You have to face your abuser again, face to face. There are just so many factors, and I think I can't even begin to imagine what that experience is like for a survivor to have to, after enduring abuse, then you get dragged through the court system, and you're just so powerless on so many levels. That's got to be terrifying.
Yeah, it is. I think it's terrifying to discover a gap in information for somebody that you feel is wanting to understand, wanting to be on your side. I mean, believes you, and then they'll ask a question like, "Well, I didn't understand if you didn't, if the judge didn't grant you a protection order. Obviously, you must not be in that much danger." And I mean, that's the kind of thing that would just make me want to, like, whatever's in my mouth, like, snort it out through my nose, just because, are you kidding me? Like, do you understand how hard it is to get anybody to take you seriously when the entire world does not want to live in a world where men beat their wives? And the danger that I was put in because people were so obsessed with confirming their own bias that there's just no way. I know this person, like, he smiled at me once. I know this person, like, more than this person who was married to them for 10 years. I know this person. There's no way my meter was off with this person, and she's just got to be crazy, and she's got to be overreacting. She must be a drama queen, that kind of thing. It is terrifying to encounter people like that everywhere.
Well, you had brought up, I think, just a very, very powerful point when you and I had spoke about domestic violence. And, because Mom and I are seeing a ton of people from the domestic violence community, survivors of domestic violence. They're reaching out to us and saying, okay, that's great that you're talking about sex abuse, but, what about domestic violence? Like, this is common. This is real. And one of the points that you had made is, it's especially difficult for domestic violence victims because you spend your entire life trying to convince everybody that your world is fine. And then all of a sudden, whenever you try to get help, now you're trying to convince those same people that your world has been crap and that it's been,
right.
You've been terrorized, and people don't want to believe it because of confirmation bias. It becomes really difficult for domestic violence victims to convince people that you're actually, your life is being threatened, literally.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think, well, I mean, it is. I think it actually, there's an aspect to it where in the case of, well, first of all, I'd just like to say we're a bit of refugees. We just don't really have anywhere else to go. And so we find somebody who's really dedicated to really nailing abusers for their behavior. And it's kind of a breath of fresh air. So that's why we're all flocking to you, Jimmy. But we have can you remind me of the last thing that you said? So I had another point that I just forgot.
Yeah, no, I was just saying about how, domestic violence victims spend their entire lives trying to convince everybody that their world is fine. And then whenever they seek help, they try to convince those same people that their world actually is, it's unsafe, and it's been forever,
Yeah, and that's okay. So just to clarify for you, because I don't think that's going to come across super clear for everyone else, but that's kind of the effect of when you're actively surviving a situation like that, you're the expert because you've been doing it and you're still alive. So obviously you have a one-up on everybody, but the actions that you take seem so irrational, and the amount of work you've done to keep it secret, because keeping it secret is also safer. If you can uphold your abusive partner's image publicly, because that's usually one of the things they're obsessed about, then you can use that to protect yourself further or make things less dangerous in comparison to how bad they can get if you're just going to be, that obstinate wife who just needs to be taught a lesson. The less you can trigger that in your spouse, is the safer. And then the result is you're so good at upholding their image and, stroking their ego for everyone else that people are offended. How dare you have lied to me for 10 years about this? And the impact is heartbreaking. It's so heartbreaking because it's humiliating to finally ask for help because it's gotten to a point where you can no longer be an expert by yourself, Sherry. Like, you're not going to survive this.
Helen and Jimmy, as you're both speaking, this is also true for sexual abuse survivors. Many times.
Oh, yeah.
Our family, Jimmy, was known as we were the family of the year.
Oh, we were incredibly good at the public image, and we weren't, we weren't faking it.
We weren't faking. We weren't, and that's maybe even harder because there was a genuine respect for your dad by all of you children, by every one of you. And then suddenly, when there's this awareness and this ability to speak out about what was going on, there's total disbelief among so many people saying, not your dad. Not him. It couldn't be. He baptized my children. He's been my prayer person. That can't be. So there's so much similarities.
Well, I remember, we were just talking about this the other day, Mom, where, I think whether you're the spouse of an abuser who's abusing you or whether you're the spouse of an abuser who's abusing others, I think the result is still fairly similar where people attack you.
Yeah.
And I remember you somebody came to you and said, well, if you would have been a better wife,
Yep.
he wouldn't have abused all these kids.
Those words still burn my heart.
And
it hurts to even hear that. Yeah, but that was the response. If you had been the wife you should have been, this never would have happened. And it's like, that's so.
Oh gosh, I'm so sorry to hear that, and I'm just saying that clearly to you because I am truly I have so much compassion, not from my own experience, but because that
hurt.
It's so
it
tragic.
Did.
I'm sorry.
That was, and at work, was quite interesting when, of course, everything hit the newspapers. I was questioned. Yeah. I was under investigation. I got called in. And went through all kinds of additional.
I forgot about that at your work. You got called in.
I got called in.
You had to do background checks.
I had already had background checks, but they wanted more extensive background checks, and the whole thing was just wow.
It's humiliating.
But because we had been in the image of others, and genuinely we had been a happy together family, so it seemed. But inside, go ahead, Helen.
No, sorry. I think that wouldn't it be amazing if people, because there is so much integrity in a wife being an upstanding citizen, a good wife, supporting their husband, doing the best they can, hoping upon hope, praying for things to get better, and trying to, protect your children from these onslaughts, taking their abuse, their psychological abuse to heart, truly, trying to help, God, please help me change so that I can be a better person. And if we had a world that was trained to recognize how much integrity and dignity is present in those situations, and with a little child who does not even know what good and bad is, and they're developing that sense, and to have them try to do the best they can, be obedient, be respectful, be responsive to the adults around them emotionally. That there's so much expertise in being a human, and if we could recognize that and validate it instead of trash it and interrogate it and just desperately trying to find something wrong with this person who was destroyed right under our nose. That we would have a world where survivors could actually become survivors instead of be denied their victimhood.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, that's powerful. Helen, another question. We thank you so much, by the way, Jimmy and I and all of our listeners, for being so open and receptive to talking about this tough topic. How do your triggers inform you of unsafe people or unsafe places? How does that work?
Well, it's one of those things where when you're in the midst of a fallout, I mean, you're literally in a war zone. You don't respond well. You don't think people need to be extended a certain amount of grace for getting oriented again and back on their feet so they can actually respond to triggers in the first place. Because when you're in a war zone and things are coming at you from everywhere and everything you thought was true is a lie, it's really unfair to expect that type of person to be able to handle a situation. And so once I was able to orient myself and find ways to navigate this system that clearly was not going to uphold my own rights in any way. I found ways to separate myself from that a bit, and yeah, a lot of extensive therapy. But one of the things that I've found is that you have to listen to your gut, and you have to learn how to respond in a way that is not going to trigger everybody around you who's seeing you have a panic attack. And so you learn how to see a danger, assess, what's the worst possible outcome that could happen here, and how do I, is that something that I can withstand? Because you have to wait. I think, Jimmy, you've talked about this before. You could recognize it right away just by seeing somebody's eyes where they look in a room. Like you can pick up on it pretty well. And so we become pretty aware of dynamics that indicate that somebody feels entitled to basically bulldoze somebody else's boundaries. And that's a huge trigger for a lot of us. And I think that there's a lot of us who haven't reached a level where we can cognitively think about that yet. Because like I said, when you're in a panic attack, you're all rationality, all higher centers of your brain shut off. And so you have to train the lower centers of your brain to calm yourself down so you can start thinking about this. Like, okay, why am I feeling this? Where is the danger here? But not react outwardly in a way that's just going to put yourself in more danger. Because unless you have the proof and you have the evidence and you know what you're allowed to stand up for yourself in the public realm for, you're not going to be able to. And so I think the best example is last week I was at the ER, but I had a nurse come in, and it was a male nurse, and I knew right away as soon as he walked in, he was not personable. He just had a dark feeling about him, and I usually try to remind myself, like, okay, is it just because he's a guy? Because that can sometimes be triggering by itself. Right. And nobody in the world is going to take you seriously if you're just like, I'm afraid of men. Because it just, you can't mitigate that kind of danger. That's not fair, first of all. They have to do something that you can identify as not okay and a crossing of a boundary. And so I knew right away he was not good news. And he wet my arm down, and I thought it was alcohol. And one of the things about alcohol is it has to dry in order to even kill the bacteria on your skin. And it also stings if you have it wet, and they go to give you an IV. And so he was coming at me, and my arm was still sopping wet. And I just said, it's still wet. And he kept coming. He didn't say anything. He really hadn't said anything to me the entire time he was in the room. He was just, really mechanical and, opening and shutting doors and drawers and stuff like that, getting stuff ready. And he kept coming at me, and I said, it's still wet. And I went to pull my arm back just by my shoulder. It wasn't like I was overtly doing that. And in the medical field, when you're giving an IV or you're doing any sort of intervention, if you have something sharp in your hands, your reaction should be to back away. Like, you want to protect the person.
Right.
And his response to me moving my arm, 2 inches away to indicate I was serious. It's still wet, and I need you to respond to me. And his response was, it's supposed to be wet. And he grabbed my upper arm and jerked it forward and just put the IV in. And
wow.
it was really, it really shook me up, but I had the self-control developed, and I saw it coming. I knew it was coming. So there's that aspect of me that I have been conditioned to fawn, which is another form of the fight or freeze. There's a fawning aspect where you develop kind of in the crisis, in the adrenaline, where you learn to pacify the people that are hurting you so that it's less bad. And so we were sitting there. My mom was sitting there, and he's wrapping me up afterwards, and I finally, he's just still being really rough, and I finally twisted my arm out of his grasp. I was like, could you just err on the side of gentleness and respect? And as I said the word respect, it was almost under my breath, and I felt this kind of pang of, oh, that's a really bad thing to say to somebody who does not care one hoot about your own autonomy. And I actually called the charge nurse in afterwards, and I explained what happened, and my mom validated it. He was very rough. And it was not appropriate. He was not personal. He didn't even explain it afterwards. And it was the next nurse that came in who had to do a different IV, or a different blood draw, who explained, oh, we're actually using a different wash that does not sting, and it also kills everything while it's still wet. And I actually knew what it was, but I didn't know at the time what was going on. He didn't follow any form of trauma-informed care, which you're supposed to treat everybody around you with. It's just basically dignity and respect.
Right.
To treat somebody as though they deserve to know and understand and have a say in what is happening to their body. And so those are situations where I'm sitting there calculating, what's the worst thing that can happen? Well, my mom's sitting right here, so he's not going to assault me. But not to minimize what happens, I'm a nursing student, and it's been drilled into me. What he did was battery and assault. And so it was completely not okay. And the charge nurse knew exactly what I was talking about because I know the language. I know how to speak to them about how unethical and inappropriate that was. And so I was able to advocate for myself. Mm-hmm. But we need to learn to recognize that most people don't know how to advocate for themselves, and we have to be willing to understand that they have a different perception. They may use different language or anything, and we have to respond to them. Like, it is not an excuse to not respond appropriately just because somebody didn't use the right language to describe assault and battery.
Yeah.
So it's
wow.
Yeah.
No, that's really powerful. And I wonder how many abuse survivors are out there who experience these triggers rightfully, and I look at that and your gut was telling you the right thing. Mm-hmm. From the moment he walked in the room, your gut was warning you that this guy was an unsafe guy, and he was. And, fortunately it wasn't a really bad assault. But nonetheless, you were violated, and, he crossed boundaries that he shouldn't have crossed. And, he did a whole lot of things that he shouldn't have done. But I wonder how many abuse survivors can't advocate for themselves because they don't have the language, or they don't have,
well, it takes courage too. Yeah. And it takes a level of, I don't know if healing is the proper word, but you have to be to that point where you are strong enough to be your own advocate. And I think that takes time and a lot of work also. Not everybody is at a point where they can be their own advocate.
Yeah.
At all.
I think all the more reason for those of us who are on the outside looking in, we need to be trained to be able to respond and see those sorts of things. I try to place myself in that room, and I would like to think that, I would have recognized that you were uncomfortable, that he was violating your space, that, I may not have had the medical language, but, I think we need to be aware when people are being triggered to be able to step in and be like, no, this isn't okay. She's pulling her arm back, clearly she's uncomfortable. you're not going to continue coming at her with this needle or whatever it is.
Right.
You know, in that circumstance, we need to be able to be aware when people are being triggered and to speak up and say something.
Well, I think of the child.
Sorry.
Just a real basic, quick example. I think of the child that, like, people come up behind them and they'll grab them by the shoulders and start massaging the shoulders. And the child pulls away, but the adult will continue doing that. Well, that's a trigger, a potential trigger to that child, or it is a very real trigger. You know, we don't necessarily know, but that child, because that child's been taught to respect their elders, doesn't say anything, just kind of pulls away. As an adult, is it, and this is a question to you, Helen, is it my responsibility to step in and say, hey, clearly she doesn't want you doing that, so don't do it. Do not rub her shoulders like that. Is that something, you know?
Yeah, I think that it's, I was just having a similar thought actually in my head as we were speaking up at the same time. I think that there's an aspect to triggers that bystanders experience where if we learn to recognize them as bystanders and not just, you know, hypervigilant survivor bystanders. But if we learn to recognize what is my gut is telling me right now that I want to think that this person is overreacting. Oh, great. Here it goes again. They're going to have a panic attack. What is wrong with them? Like, can't they just deal with it? If we have those gut feelings of, I want to look away. I want to avoid acknowledging or validating anything about this because I feel like if I don't support it, that somehow it'll be like training a dog with like negative reinforcement of like isolation. So if we can recognize in ourselves, because every single human being operates on that principle of wanting to feel safe and wanting to believe that the world is a safer place, because it's really traumatic to live in a world where you know it's not safe. And so if we can learn to recognize and maybe even just do the same evaluation, what is the worst possible thing that could happen in this situation? And what is my duty in this situation? And I don't care if you're trained in ethics or autonomy or HIPAA violations or anything. I don't care if you're not trained in it. You know, everybody has a conscience. And if you continue to turn away and listen to that gut feeling of, oh, I want to just get away from this and not have to deal with it. And, oh, this is not my responsibility. And here's all my, like, you can come up with lists immediately. This is why I can't step in. This is another reason I can't step in. This is another reason I can't step in. Instead, what would happen if you made a list of reasons you should step in? Like you can sleep at night, like you can, and being courageous in that way and practicing that and honing that skill to a point where you're not panicking for them, then you can become just an amazing advocate that's really validating. And that's what I was talking about beforehand. You can mitigate long-term trauma in the traumatic moment. I have seen it over and over in births where I am just cringing about something that happened, some provider doing something that I just felt was not okay. But I'm letting the mom have the experience, and I'm doing everything I can to empower her and let her know what's going on, make her feel like she is part of this decision-making process as much as possible. And at the end, I'll do like a post-partum, evaluation, because I want to know how I came across, because I know exactly how I felt about that moment. But I want to know how it came across to them. And hands down, even the most just inappropriate things that would happen during birth, because a lot of times providers can make birth traumatic for people.
Mm-hmm.
And so those moments, you'll talk to a mom where even if the baby had to be like resuscitated and there's all these crazy things going on and you're just like, oh, are you all right? Like, how are you doing? And they're like, oh, I just couldn't have done that without you. And I was so pleased. I will never do this again without somebody there with me like this. And I'm just over the moon happy with the experience. And I'm just sitting there thinking, thank God.
Yeah. Wow.
Because they will be able to walk down that road of, if there is, anything underlying that they haven't, picked up on yet, or it hasn't like come to them yet, that maybe they didn't like that so much. They know they can come back to me. We can talk about it, but they were given agency to mitigate their own trauma in the moment. And it made it just that moment. And they were able to walk away from it relatively unscathed. So,
wow, that's really powerful.
That is.
Well, I think I can speak for Mom and say that we could probably talk to you for hours.
Yes, we could. Yes.
This has been incredibly helpful for me. I've learned a ton just from talking to you.
Wonderful. Absolutely.
And, I have so many more questions. We just don't have the time to ask them. Which is sad, but I guess all good things have to come to an end. But I want to thank you so much for your insight. And you just had so many, I think, big moments in this podcast that, at least for me, where
very much
felt,
so, and your willingness to open up and share with us and teach us. I felt like I was sitting at your feet and you were teaching me so much. Thank you so very much.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to thank you guys. This is the only thing I've found really that resonated with me as far as just having a real rational voice to listen to, like trying to grapple with these really hard questions. And I appreciate you guys doing this work.
Well, thank you very much. That means a lot. And to all our listeners, thank you for listening in, and we'll catch you next episode.
Thanks again for listening to today's episode of the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast. Thank you to our patrons who make this podcast possible. If you found it helpful, please follow on Spreaker, subscribe on Google Play Music, Apple Podcast, or Stitcher. If you believe in what we do, consider supporting the podcast by becoming a patron, and check out the cool rewards our patrons receive. Share with your friends and tell the world. Join us in speaking out on sex abuse so we can change the tides and prevent abuse.